Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. I did decide to go ahead and do a video for DPS as well. It's not as complicated as tanking and healing. DPS tends to be like the easiest role to play in Mutations, but there are some things you should know. So, looking at attributes, DPS, like I have a food buff on right now, but you're typically going to be running 5 con for M3s, so you can maximize your damage output. And you're going to want to be in light armor. I'm running featherweight with Frigid Dawn. I only have Blood Drinker on this gear set because it's like a solo gear set, but you wouldn't be using this in a mutation. And as far as weapons, the weapons you DPS with, they're gonna depend on what the other DPS are using. So you always need a spear, because the spear has a 30% rend and a 30% weaken, and then if you have skewer, your spear should have the enfeebling skewer perk, because that's a 40% weaken. 47% weaken. So spear is kind of a must-have. Another must-have is a great axe with enfeebling maelstrom, just to clump the mobs tighter. Because the tighter you can clump the mobs in a mutation, the faster you can kill them. So, I mean, you can run spear and great axe. You don't have to, but those are two mandatory weapons for mutations. Greatsword is just good for AoE cleave damage. It just does a crap ton of damage. So if you can have multiple greatswords between your 3 DPS, that's great. Another good DPS weapon would be Rapier, which can be paired with Spear or Ice Gauntlet because it scales off of intelligence. Hatchet used to be really good. It's not as good anymore because it got nerfed, but it does okay. So primarily, you're going to be running Spear, Greatsword, and Great Axe, or a Rapier between your 3 DPS. Fire Staff, Bow, ranged weapons, they don't tend to do as good just because they don't have the damage output. You can thank Amazon for that one. That's not me. And the other thing about playing ranged is it can break up the clump if you get aggro, or it puts you outside of the AoE healing, which can slow the run down. And then depending on the mutation, if, like, let's say it's ice, it would put you outside of the ice ring where you're going to take a lot of damage as well. Now, as far as doing the actual damage when you're DPSing, let's say you're running a spear, you would do your skewer and your perforate, and then you would switch to your primary weapon like your greatsword, and you just start going to town. Some things to watch out for is I think a lot of DPS forget that they can block. So they just get like slapped in the face. So you have to remember, like, especially if the tank is still like taunting everything, you have to remember that you can block. And then for bosses, you have to try to dodge their big attacks. You can't really block big attacks. You have to try to keep an eye out for them and dodge them. And another thing to keep in mind is, like, depending on the boss, like sometimes, like, if you have to remember not to animation lock yourself. So here we'll go do a poll. Again, pretend that I have a tank with me. So we're gonna do perforate, switch to my primary weapon, and I'm blocking. Now you have to keep in mind that you don't want to animation lock yourself. So right now he's hitting me, and if I was doing an ability, I would just be taking damage. So I have to wait for them to do their ability and then, you know, do my attacks. So, you know, you can dodge back. You can like kind of like go in and out. So I can pop in, dodge back, block. So if the tank and the healer are supposed to be keeping you alive, your job is to like do your best to stay alive, right? So that means like just not getting slapped in the face. So yeah, just remember that you can block, try to block in between your abilities, and try to, you know, make sure you're not animation locking yourself when a big attack is coming. But I mean, other than that, DPS is pretty straightforward. All right, guys. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and thanks for watching.